Previously, we have discussed suspensive condition and resolutory condition. Today, we are going to talk about the other classifications. Classifications of conditions according to cause or origin include potestative, casual, and mixed. In a potestative condition, the happening of the condition depends upon the will of one of the contracting parties. It may be potestative on the part of the creditor or on the part of the debtor. If potestative on the part of the creditor and the condition is suspensive, the obligation is valid. For example, Anton shall give Henry a laptop if Henry will establish his accounting office in Baguio City. Here, the happening of the condition depends on the will of the creditor, Henry. It is Henry who will reap the benefits of the happening of the condition. Thus, he has the choice of whether to let the condition happen or not, thus making the obligation valid. If potestative on the part of the creditor and the condition is resolutory, the obligation is also valid. For example, Anton shall allow Henry to use Anton's laptop until Henry will be able to establish his accounting office in Baguio City. The decision of establishing an accounting office in Baguio still depends on the creditor, Henry, who will reap the benefits if the condition will not happen, or who will suffer the consequences if the condition will happen, thus making the obligation valid. Are the rules the same if it is potestative on the part of the debtor? It depends. If the condition is suspensive, the obligation is void or not valid. For example, Anton shall give Henry a laptop if Anton will establish his own accounting office in Baguio City. Here, the happening of the condition will depend on the debtor. Anton may opt not to establish his accounting office in Baguio in order for the obligation to deliver the laptop to not arise. Such instance is prejudicial on the part of the creditor, and thus the obligation becomes void. However, if the condition is resolutory, the obligation is valid. For instance, Anton shall allow Henry to use his laptop until Anton has already established his accounting office in Baguio. This is valid because Anton already complied with his obligation to lend the laptop to Henry, and the happening of the condition will only terminate such obligation. Another classification is a casual condition. In a casual condition, the happening of the condition depends upon chance or upon the will of a third person. For example, Anton shall give his laptop to Henry if Justin joins a painting contest. Here, the fulfillment of the condition depends upon Justin, who is a third person to the contract between Anton and Henry. The last classification according to cause is called a mixed condition, in which the happening of the condition depends partly upon the will of one of the contracting parties and partly upon chance or upon the will of a third person. For example, Anton shall give his laptop to Henry if Henry will join the accounting team of Pine & Cone's company. Here, the demandability of the obligation depends on the will of Henry. That is, if he decides to join the accounting team of Pine & Cone's company, as well as the chance or will of a third person, and that is, if Pine & Cone's company will hire Henry as part of its accounting team. Classifications of condition as to possibility include possible and impossible conditions. It is a possible condition when the condition is capable of fulfillment legally and fiscally, while an impossible condition is one that cannot exist or is not capable of fulfillment or those contrary to good customs or public policy and those prohibited by law. Here's an example of an impossible condition involving an obligation to do. Henry is obliged to give Anton 1 million pesos if Anton can fly across the Milky Way up to the end of the universe. The condition here is incapable of fulfillment, thus an impossible obligation which is void. Another example is, Henry is obliged to give Anton 1 million pesos if Anton will kill Justin. Such condition is impossible because it is contrary to law. What if it is an impossible condition, but it involves an obligation not to do? For example, Henry is obliged to give Anton 1 million pesos if the latter will not fly across the Milky Way up to the end of the universe. Since an obligation not to do is involved, it's as if the parties did not agree as to the fulfillment of the condition. Therefore, the obligation of Henry to pay Anton 1 million pesos becomes immediately demandable. Classifications of a condition as to mode include positive and negative conditions. There is a positive condition when it involves the performance of an act or the happening of some event at a determinate time. For example, Anton is to give Henry a car if Henry will be able to establish his accounting office in Baguio on December 31, 2020. If Henry will not be able to fulfill the condition on December 31, 2020, then it means that Anton will not have the obligation to deliver the car to Henry. On the other hand, a negative condition involves the non-performance of an act or that an event will not take place at the determinate time. For example, Anton is to give Henry a car if Henry will not establish his accounting office in Baguio on December 31, 2020. If Henry will not establish his office in Baguio on the said date, then the obligation of Anton to give Henry a car becomes effective on January 1, 2021. We're done discussing the kinds of conditions under conditional obligations. In our next video, we are going to discuss obligations with a period.